So going directly to our Ceph dashboard, we can log in initially with our administrator account. Credentials will be provided elsewhere. And we can log in and take a look at our cluster. Now, generally, Ceph-only deployments are used for object storage specifically, and they utilize some pretty good mechanics for storage efficiency. And so I've done some testing earlier, and so we see some information here. 5% of the cluster is pre-allocated, so the cluster is really at 0, but we created some scaffolding for the future data to be stored. And so we can explore the hosts that are part of this cluster. So we've got 4 hosts, 3 of them are control plane hosts, and 1 is being used for storage. We can inspect the physical disks that are being used. NVMEs are used for the database of basically the file objects that are then stored on the slower media. We can see the OSD, the partition usage. This is one of the most important metrics, as once you hit 85%, you'll see warnings. At 90%, Ceph will alert you that you are near a critical capacity, and at 95%, the cluster does go read-only to preserve any kind of data. You can add users to Ceph, so very similarly how I logged in with admin, or if I use the CLI to talk to Ceph. Some logs, obviously everything's healthy because, well, everything is fresh. You can set up alerts, and there's even a way to upgrade your Ceph cluster from inside of here to stay on top of things. I want to cover pools briefly. Basically, you can utilize the storage media to create different types of data efficiencies. So for example, a replica of 3 means there's 3 copies of the same file, and so the efficiency ratio is about 33%, and so that would utilize quite a bit of storage. However, for the main objective here, we are performing object storage, which uses an erasure coding 3:1 for an efficiency of 75. One host can go down without any data loss, and so we can also inspect performance of each pool. So for example, when we write to our object storage pool, we will see that it will fill up. So the pool is called buckets data, and so we can see that this is the amount free in that pool that we could consume, and there are some other types of information. And we did enable compression that we will demo, because it is quite an interesting mechanic. And so we didn't provision any block or network file system storage here. Typically, the Ceph cluster has to be in the same network internally in order to be able to access these assets, but as we're going to access this externally as an object storage S3 type of service, the main bread and butter are going to be the object gateway. And so at the moment, there is 0 data stored in the S3 cluster, in the object storage specifically. And let's go ahead and figure out how to use this. So the only real thing that we need is a user. So we need to create a user for our object storage. Let's go ahead and do that. We're going to create a user called ohmytest. We'll set the name to ohmy. And we're going to keep everything as default. We don't have a limit on the amount of buckets this user can create. We don't need to suspend the user. The auto-generate key will create S3 credentials for us to actually use, and no quotas. Let's go ahead and do this. That's about it. So now that we've created the user, we just need to get our credentials, and then we can start interacting with the object storage. There are no buckets currently, and we will see that change. So let's go back to the users, expand ohmytest, click on the ohmytest user for the S3 type credentials, and click show. This will give us our access key and secret key. One of the most common tools to use for S3 access is called S3 CMD. So let's go ahead and configure it for this cluster. And so I've typed out the IP for the S3 endpoint that we will use. Let's go ahead and 3cmd configure. And so that's going to ask us for our access key, and we can just either provide these credentials to someone securely, or we can just copy from here. So let's go ahead, access key, secret key. For the default region, just press enter. And so for our S3 endpoint, for now, this is just a direct IP, but in the future that could be an FQDN that is pointed to that IP. And same goes for the bucket plus host name. We're just going to specify the endpoint. There is no active encryption set up, and we do have this path on our local system. So this is the part that if we deploy an FQDN and a TLS, we would say yes here, so it uses HTTPS. But at the moment in its state, the endpoint will just use port 80. So we will say no, there is no HTTP proxy, and that's it. So let's go ahead and test out our connectivity and authentication. And it says, hey, your access key and secret worked fine. Would you like to save these configurations? Sure. All right, so let's clear the screen. And at this point, when I use this command against the S3, I will see that there is nothing there yet. So let's go ahead and make a bucket. Great, so we've created a bucket in which we will then bring our files over. If we take a look at buckets, we can also see that now OMyTest bucket is owned by OMyTest user. It's currently using 0. There is no limit on the capacity or objects. All right, let's upload some stuff. I have a picture, really cool picture of Neptune. It's a modern picture. So we'll do that. We've uploaded. And then I also have a 5 gigabyte text file. And I want to upload this to kind of show some interesting compression mechanics that Ceph has to offer. So what we're going to do is we're going to split this 5 gig file in 250 megabyte chunks and upload them chunk by chunk. This is pretty common in the object storage world. So let's go ahead and get that started. So the client itself is the one that does the splitting, so that's why it's taking some time. It's basically separating this one big file into probably like 20 or so chunks. And then it will start the upload process. Now 21 chunks. There we go, and we can see kind of the upload speeds and mechanics for this file. And so while that's going on in the background, we can take a peek at the cluster usage. So things are being uploaded. I think it refreshes about every minute or so. The data lags by a few minutes, but I think what's really cool to see is that we're really uploading a 5 gig file. And so that's really interesting in the way that works for Ceph. So let's kind of wait for this upload to finish. All right, great. So that is completed. Pretty fast transfer speeds. And so what is clearly observable is that RGW is not using 5 gigabytes, and that is because of certain compression mechanics. Very useful. So we can see that the used capacity is over 5 gigs. However, underneath it all, if we go back to our pools and inspect our buckets pool that we configured compression on, and we can take a look in the overall performance tab, we'll see something pretty interesting. And so we've uploaded some data, and we see that the text file is super duper compressible. And so we've actually extracted quite a bit of compression saving mechanics. So underneath it all, we're really using just a little bit. The compression for the text file ended up being 15 to 1, almost. And so we're only using about 441 megs to store this 5 gig text file. All right, let's just, I guess, wrap this up by exposing our Neptune picture to the public. And so I can basically use the 3CMD. Let's go ahead and first list what we've got in our S3 storage. I'm going to do S3. We see there is one bucket called OMyTest. Inside of the OMyTest, we have our 5 gig text file as well as the picture of Neptune. And let's go ahead and set some ACL. So we're going to set ACL to ACL public. So we basically said that that file should be accessible via the internet. And we can take a peek at that. All right, and it gives us a direct URL to the file. So let's take a look and make sure that we can access this. There it is. So now we are connected directly to our object storage. It is over port 80, so it is not secure, but in the future, again, all of this can be reconfigured. All this really displays is right out of the box, you can start storing data in your S3 storage.